Selina Voss had spent 7 years building a life with Aldric Fenn, a man she thought loved her for everything she was, until the night she discovered his secret dating profile and realized he'd been living a double life behind her back. Selina Gray had always believed that love was the ultimate reward for enduring a life full of trials. Born in a small town that didn't understand her truth, she had faced alienation from her family, relentless bullying during her school years, and more than one violent encounter for simply being herself. Yet despite all of that, she survived, she thrived, and she rebuilt her identity with strength and grace. After years of self-discovery, hormone therapy, and painful surgeries, Selina emerged as the woman she had always been inside. She moved to Maplebridge, a quiet suburban town where no one knew her past, and she started fresh. With time, she became a well-respected yoga instructor and mental wellness coach. Her online following grew steadily, and she was often invited to speak at workshops and local events, especially during Pride Month. Her life seemed not only stable but inspirational. It was in Maplebridge where she met Aldric Voss. He was tall, reserved, and had an old-world charm that stood out in a time of fast texts and shallow connections. He ran a small antique shop filled with time-worn treasures, dusty books, and clocks that ticked slowly like they had nowhere to be. Aldric was different from the other men Selina had known. He didn't flinch when she told him about her past. He didn't make her feel like she had to prove anything. They spent months walking through parks, sharing stories over coffee, and learning each other's rhythm. When he proposed to her on the edge of the lake during fall, she said yes without hesitation. For the first time in her life, Selina felt safe. The early years of their marriage were blissful. Selina and Aldric hosted dinner parties for friends and neighbors, traveled to quiet coastal towns, and shared inside jokes that only they understood. Their home was filled with small traditions: tea before bed, weekend movie marathons, Sunday morning plant shopping. Selina documented their love online, posting aesthetic snapshots of their life. Aldric sipping coffee by the window, their hands intertwined at a picnic, a shot of their wedding rings placed over a book of poetry. To everyone watching, they were a model couple, but in private, subtle changes began to creep in. Aldric started working later than usual, claiming business at the antique store had picked up. He would come home tired, sometimes skipping their nightly tea, barely engaging in the routines they once cherished. His phone, once left on the kitchen counter without a second thought, was now always in his pocket or face down. Selina, who had learned not to jump to conclusions, tried not to let her mind wander. She reminded herself that people grow and change, that marriage ebbs and flows, and that stress could look like distance. Still, it felt different. She could sense the shift not just in his actions but in his energy. His kisses were shorter, his compliments less frequent. She had never needed constant reassurance, but the silence growing between them was loud enough to keep her up at night. It wasn't just the emotional detachment. Selina started noticing more tangible oddities: receipts in the trash from restaurants she had never been to, a faint whiff of perfume on his shirt that wasn't hers, a phone number scribbled on a napkin, carelessly stuffed in his coat pocket. Each incident on its own seemed meaningless, but together they created a pattern. That was hard to ignore. Her heart sank every time she tried to rationalize these signs away. She wanted to believe he was still the man who had once promised her forever, but the certainty she once felt began to crumble like dust in her hands. What made it worse was how alone she felt. Her closest friends admired Aldric. Her online followers envied her perfect marriage. Everyone around her believed she had won at life, had found the fairy tale ending after all she'd endured. How could she admit that something was wrong, that the man who had stood by her side during her hardest battles might now be hiding something behind her back? She kept her fears to herself, locked behind a smile and carefully worded captions. But deep inside, a storm had begun to form. Quiet at first, but growing stronger by the day. Selina had no idea that the answers she feared were worse than her darkest suspicions. And once she uncovered the truth, there would be no turning back. Selina had always trusted her instincts. Over the years, they had saved her from bad relationships, sketchy business offers, and situations that didn't feel right. But this time, the feeling in her gut wasn't a momentary flicker of doubt. It was a persistent, gnawing weight that refused to leave her alone. Each day her mind replayed the little inconsistencies. The way Aldric flinched when she picked up his phone, how he seemed more alert whenever a message came through. The growing distance between them no longer felt like a phase, but like the emergence of something permanent, deliberate. Selina tried everything to dismiss the unease. She focused on her studio, took longer walks, meditated more. But the weight stayed, urging her to act. One night, while Aldric was asleep, Selina made a decision that she had avoided for weeks. She reached over to his nightstand and quietly retrieved his tablet, which was typically used for browsing antique catalogs and watching documentaries. She felt guilty. Violating trust was never something she took lightly. But her need for clarity overpowered any hesitation. She turned the device on, surprised to find it unlocked. At first, she scrolled aimlessly through news tabs, store inventories, and saved bookmarks. But then she noticed a folder named Work Projects, which was odd since Aldric rarely did anything digital for work. Inside it were encrypted files and apps that had been disguised with generic icons. She tapped on one and watched as a dating app opened. Its interface sleek and discreet, her hands trembled. The profile was under the name Jace Wild. The photo was of Aldric, though edited slightly. His beard trimmed down, filters softening his appearance. His bio read like something written by a stranger. He claimed to be single, adventurous, looking for a traditional woman who valued loyalty and femininity. There was no mention of a wife, no mention of Selina, no mention of anything real. With every swipe and scroll, Selina felt the floor beneath her heart give way. He had matched with dozens of women. There were flirty messages, plans to meet, and even compliments he used to give her, now repurposed and recycled for strangers. Selina felt sick. This wasn't just a betrayal of vows, it was a betrayal of identity. Aldric was seeking out women who represented the very idea Selina had fought so hard to redefine. She dug deeper. The inbox contained dates, hotel addresses, restaurant reservations, and messages laced with innuendo. He had a whole other life, threaded carefully between the gaps in their shared one. Worse still, the earliest messages dated back over a year. This wasn't a recent mistake, it was sustained deception. Selina stared at the screen, the quiet hum of the night making her feel more alone than she had in years. The man she had trusted, married, and defended to the world had been living a secret fantasy, one where she didn't exist. In that moment, Selina experienced a shift, not sudden, but gradual, like a slow burn. The heartbreak was no longer fresh or shocking. It transformed into something else, an ache wrapped in rage. She thought about all the sacrifices she had made, all the moments she had doubted herself when it was him who deserved to be questioned. Her mind raced, not with sadness, but with cold calculation. She backed up the files to a private drive, screenshots, app data, emails. She collected them all. Evidence. Proof. Not for the police, not for the internet, but for herself. She needed to face the full truth, however brutal it was. The next day, she didn't confront him. She served him breakfast like usual, smiled when he talked about the new artifacts arriving at the shop, and even kissed him goodbye at the door. She watched him walk away, thinking of how well he lied, how confidently he navigated both lives. But she didn't cry. She didn't scream. Something inside her had frozen. Her emotions were no longer chaotic. They were precise, sharp. She knew then that she wouldn't simply leave. That wouldn't be enough. Aldric Voss had built a world on lies, and Selina was no longer content with just knowing the truth. She wanted control. She wanted an ending that he could never rewrite. Selina spent the next several days in quiet observation, masking her emotions behind the practiced poise of someone who had learned long ago how to survive under scrutiny. On the outside, nothing changed. She still posted smiling photos, still attended yoga sessions, still walked through the local farmer's market as though her world hadn't been split open. But inside, something darker was forming. Her sense of betrayal no longer just ached. It simmered. Aldric had taken from her more than just trust. He had shattered the fragile peace she had fought so hard to build. She wasn't about to let him walk away untouched. While Aldric continued his double life unaware, Selina began to construct her plan. She wasn't impulsive by nature. She approached problems with a measured calm, the way she had when coming out to her family, or navigating the world as a transgender woman in spaces that weren't always welcoming. This wouldn't be a messy reaction. It would be deliberate. She reviewed everything she had saved from Aldric's device, studied his messages, tracked his appointments, and identified the patterns in his behavior. It became clear that every Wednesday evening he met someone new at a boutique hotel just outside town, always under his alias. That night, he would return home slightly drunk, smelling faintly of aftershave that wasn't his. Selina would pretend to be asleep, but she always knew. Instead of confronting him directly, Selina used the dating app to create a fake profile. She crafted a persona that fit Aldric's preferences, a soft-spoken traditional woman who loved vintage books and classic romance. She used AI tools to create realistic photos of a fictional person named Melinda. The messages she exchanged with Aldric under this alias were laced with flirtation, vulnerability, and just enough mystery to lure him in. Within days, Aldric was hooked. He began opening up to Melinda in ways he hadn't to Selina in months. He complimented her intelligence, shared his frustrations about life at home, and talked about feeling misunderstood. Selina read every word with cold detachment. Her husband, the man who once claimed to love her beyond identity, was confessing to a stranger, her own creation. Once she had earned his trust as Melinda, she invited him to meet in person. The plan was simple: the same hotel he often used, the same room number he'd booked before. Aldric agreed without hesitation, never suspecting he was walking into a trap of his own making. On the day of the meeting, Selina booked the room under the fake name and checked in hours earlier. She brought only a small bag with essentials: gloves, cleaning wipes, a burner phone, and the burner's charger. The plan wasn't murder, not yet. It was confrontation, exposure, a chance to see the look on his face when he realized he had been played. She wanted to watch him unravel. But something changed once she was inside that room. Sitting on the edge of the bed, staring at her reflection in the mirror, Selina felt something shift. She imagined Aldric walking in, smiling like he always did, his charm rehearsed, his lies wrapped in that same gentle voice. She imagined him trying to explain it all away, to manipulate her one last time. The thought filled her with a fury so sharp it made her hands shake. All the moments she had doubted herself, all the nights she had waited for him, hoping for change, came rushing back like a tidal wave. She was no longer interested in just revealing the truth. She wanted finality. As evening approached, she stood by the window and watched the parking lot fill slowly. Her heart pounded not with fear, but with resolve. She had crossed a threshold within herself, one she never thought she would reach. This was no longer about heartbreak. It was about power, about reclaiming something she had lost. The game was almost over, and Selina wasn't planning to lose. When she finally saw his car pull into the lot, her breath caught, but not from nerves. It was anticipation. He was walking into the final scene of a story he didn't know he was part of. Selina knew that what happened next would change everything. Aldrich walked through the dimly lit hallway of the boutique hotel, unaware that his every movement was being tracked. Selina watched from behind the peephole, her breath steady, her face emotionless. He was dressed with more care than usual, ironed shirt, expensive cologne, and a new leather belt she hadn't seen before. For someone who was supposed to be in a committed marriage, he looked like a man entering a first date. He knocked twice, the signal he had agreed upon with Melinda. Selina opened the door slowly, just enough to let him step inside before she locked it behind him. For a few seconds, Aldrich stood in stunned silence, confusion creeping across his face. The person standing in front of him was not Melinda, it was his wife. His real wife. His double life had just collided head-on with the very reality he had tried to escape. Selina said nothing. She didn't have to. The look on her face said everything. Aldrich stammered, gestured, tried to explain, but Selina didn't flinch. Her plan had already taken root, and now it was time for him to face what he had created. She walked past him and picked up a folder from the desk. Printed screenshots, message transcripts, profile photos, all bound neatly. She handed it to him. He flipped through it, his face draining of color with each page. His confidence, always so steady, cracked under the weight of the truth. He tried to speak, but Selina raised a hand, silencing him with a calm that unnerved even her. This wasn't about a confrontation anymore. It was an execution of trust, of illusion, of the man Aldrich pretended to be. Selina stepped back, watching him pace, watching the excuses pile up and fall apart. She had imagined this moment so many times, but now that it was real, it felt hollow. The satisfaction she thought she'd feel wasn't there. It was replaced by something else, a creeping clarity. He wasn't sorry. He wasn't broken. He was only afraid of being exposed. That realization struck her harder than all the messages combined. His remorse wasn't for his actions. It was for getting caught. Something shifted in her chest, something final. She had brought the burner phone for backup, planning to record their conversation as evidence. But now her intentions turned darker. She walked to her bag and retrieved the small vial of sedatives she had hidden. It had taken her weeks to acquire them without suspicion, leftovers from a friend's surgery, gradually collected and crushed into fine powder. She had originally intended them only as a means of gaining control during the confrontation. But the lines of intention were blurring. Selina fixed him a glass of whiskey, his favorite brand, just like she had done countless times before. He accepted it, still disoriented, still trying to find the right thing to say. She watched as he drank, watched the tension leave his shoulders slightly. In the silence, the seconds felt like hours. As the sedative took hold, Aldrich's words slurred, his movements slowed, and panic returned to his eyes. He realized something was wrong far too late. Selina remained still, her gaze unwavering. He stumbled toward the bed, collapsing halfway. His breathing grew uneven, his body limp. Selina stood over him, watching the man who had lied, cheated, and erased her from his second life. The man who had made her feel invisible. There was no fear in her now, only a profound stillness. She knelt beside him, her hands trembling not with anxiety but with decision. She reached for the pillow and pressed it firmly over his face, holding it there with the full weight of everything he had done. He struggled, weakly at first, then barely at all. When it was over, the room fell silent. Selina stood up slowly, looking at his lifeless form, not with grief but with resolve. She hadn't just ended a life. She had ended a lie. And for the first time in years, she felt real. The truth was finally hers. The hours after Aldrich's death passed in a strange, weightless haze. Selina sat on the edge of the bed, staring at the still form that used to be her husband. She didn't cry. There was no dramatic outburst, no crumbling of will. The silence felt heavier than his betrayal had ever been, but it was also more honest. For once there were no illusions between them, no performance, no masks, just the truth lying cold on the mattress. Selina wiped down every surface she had touched. She wore gloves just as she'd planned and used the wipes she brought to erase any trace of herself from the room. The burner phone was destroyed, its pieces scattered into the toilet tank. She changed clothes, packed everything neatly into a disposable bag, and walked calmly to the parking lot, head down, face unreadable. No one gave her a second glance. The same woman who had once struggled to be seen now moved invisibly through the night. The following morning, the hotel staff found Aldric's body during routine housekeeping. At first, it appeared to be a tragic overdose. An empty whiskey bottle on the nightstand, a few stray pills scattered on the floor. There were no signs of forced entry, no bruises or blood, no fingerprints left behind. Police launched a quiet investigation, but it yielded nothing definitive. There was no clear motive, no suspects. The room had been paid for in cash by someone named Melinda Ah, a woman who didn't exist. Hotel cameras captured Aldric entering alone. No footage showed anyone else leaving. Selina returned home before sunrise, composed and careful. She logged into Aldric's dating account one final time and deleted it. Then she did the same with his social media. She left his phone in a shallow creek on the outskirts of town, ensuring it would never be found intact. As far as the world knew, Aldric had died mysteriously during a private getaway. Perhaps heart failure, perhaps something more scandalous, but unprovable. His secrets died with him. The news reached friends and colleagues within days. Shock rippled through the community, but Selina's grief seemed believable. She played her part perfectly. Too stunned to speak, too devastated to engage with reporters, she declined interviews and avoided the public eye. Neighbors dropped off flowers. Friends sent messages of support. In their eyes, she was a widow shattered by sudden loss. Only Selina knew the truth. She wasn't broken, she was free. After the funeral, which she kept small and impersonal, Selina left the city. She sold the house, liquidated Aldric's remaining assets, and vanished quietly into a new identity. No one asked questions. No one suspected a thing. Her face had always been familiar, but her story had never truly belonged to her. Until now. She moved 2 states away and started fresh under a new name. There she worked part-time at a bookstore, kept to herself, and never shared her past. What haunted her wasn't guilt, it was how easy it had all become. The hardest part hadn't been ending Aldric's life. It had been surviving the years leading up to it, the lies, the loneliness, the feeling of being unseen in her own marriage. For too long she had clung to the hope that he would come back to her, that their love would matter again. But love without truth is a cage, and Selina had been locked inside it far too long. Occasionally, headlines would pop up online about Aldric's case, still unsolved, still no leads. Some speculated he had enemies. Others blamed substance abuse or secret affairs. But the world moved on, as it always does. His memory faded from public conversation, reduced to whispers and unanswered questions. Selina watched quietly from afar, never engaging, never explaining. In her new life, she found a strange kind of peace. Not joy, not exactly, but the quiet satisfaction of knowing she had taken back control. She had told her story in the only way he would ever understand. And while the world may never know what truly happened in that hotel room, Selina did. She carried that truth with her not as a burden, but as a shield. And she never looked back.